A major defeat for President Trump on Capitol Hill. And no, it did not come just from Democrats. This was a bipartisan rebuke of President Trump. Any moment, the president could issue the first veto of his presidency. In fact, just minutes ago, he tweeted that word, veto, after 12 Republican senators joined all 47 Democrats to slap down the president's declaration of a national emergency to get the border wall funding he's been unable to get from Congress, despite 2 previous years of Republican rule. Senators Collins, Murkowski, Lee, Paul, Portman, Romney, Alexander, Toomey, Moran, Blunt, Rubio, and Wicker all breaking with President Trump today, despite White House threats that their votes would have repercussions. President Trump did make a last-ditch effort on Twitter today to try to convince Republicans to stick with him, tweeting, quote, "A vote for today's resolution by Republican senators is a vote for Nancy Pelosi, crime, and the open border Democrats." But one wonders, after almost 4 years of candidate then President Trump's hyperbole on Twitter, whether such tweets have any real effect anymore. CNN's Abby Phillips starts off our coverage today from the White House.
Clerk will call the roll.
A stinging defeat for President Trump today on his signature issue, building the wall, as 12 Republican senators joined Democrats in repudiating his national emergency declaration to build the border wall without going through Congress for the funding.
The yeas are 59, the nays are 41. The joint resolution is passed.
Despite last-ditch drama and attempts to twist arms on Capitol Hill, Trump will now be forced to use the first veto of his presidency to defend his border wall.
I'll probably have to veto, and it's not going to be overturned, and we're going to have our whole thing. It's been, the legal scholars all say it's totally constitutional. It's very important. It's really a border security vote. It's pure and simple. It's a vote for border security.
But Republicans on Capitol Hill didn't see it that way. Several senators saying their vote is about the Constitution and separation of powers, not the president.
Well, he'd rather have me vote in a different direction, but I let him know that this for me is a matter of defending the Constitution and the balance of powers that is core to our Constitution.
In the hours before the vote, Trump and his allies scrambling to minimize Republican defections. The president sending a barrage of tweets urging his party to stick with him, tying the vote to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and crime, and even reversing himself by saying that he will support a bill to curtail future national emergencies in an effort to sway lawmakers on the fence. At the fence is exactly where Senators Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and Ben Sasse found themselves last night, after rushing over to meet with the president, waiting at the White House gate and refusing to leave until they were let in, hoping to strike a last-minute deal.
Kind of barged in on his supper. Only in the Trump presidency could you do that. If it had been me, I'd have told us all to go to hell and get out of here. I'm having dinner with my wife. But the point is that we had a very good discussion. Whether or not we can bridge the differences, I don't know.
But according to sources, the president was irritated the senators had interrupted his family meal to present different proposals for resolving the impasse. Graham pushing Trump to support a bill that would diminish future emergency declarations, and Cruz pushing a new proposal that would not use military construction money to build the wall. A White House lawyer present for the meeting rejected that on the spot. The last-minute lobbying didn't work, but Trump is already passing the blame.
The Republicans didn't fight hard enough.
And just now on Capitol Hill, the Senator Chuck Schumer telling reporters that he believes that there will be more of these fights in the future. The National Emergencies Act allows them to bring a resolution of disapproval every 6 months, meaning that President Trump could be in this position numerous times until this fight is really over. Asked why Democrats would want to do that, he says that even if they have to fight it 10 times, they're hoping to win on the 11th time, Jake.
All right, Abby Phillip at the White House for us. Thanks so much. Let's chat about this with the experts. Mike, 12 Republicans rebuking the president on how he's trying to build his border wall. It's a pretty big defeat.
You know, is it? I mean, these are constitutionalists. This isn't fighting him on the wall. This happens, the separation of powers fights happens under every single president, right? The executive branch goes further and further. The legislative branch has some people that stand up for it. The vast majority of Republicans in the Senate and in the House and across the country's grassroots want him to do this. And so he's going to veto it. They don't have enough votes. There aren't enough Republicans to rebuke him on a veto. And so he's going to get the wall funding.
What do you think?
This is classically Trump in that Lee handed him a way out of this that would have been sort of a bit graceful, and he was like, nah, pass. Look, I like that 12 Republicans are with it on this because Congress should guard its powers jealously, and they should make laws and stuff. And I know it's very old school, but I appreciate that. He will veto it, and I don't think they have what it takes to overcome that. But I like seeing a little gumption here. And, although Tom Tillis, by the way, ripping that Band-Aid off and then trying to put it back on, it's not going to work.
Let's talk about that, because Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina who is up for re-election, 2 weeks ago it didn't just say he was going to vote against the president, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, writing about conservatives who cried foul about President Obama using emergency powers, saying, quote, "There's no intellectual honesty in now turning around and arguing that there's an imaginary asterisk attached to executive overreach, that it's acceptable for my party but not thy party. As a U.S. Senator, I cannot justify providing the executive with more ways to bypass Congress. As a conservative, I cannot endorse a precedent that I know future left-wing presidents will exploit to advance radical policies." And then today, right before the vote, never mind.
Somebody may have gotten a little talking to, right? A little horse trading behind the scenes. Look, I think you've heard me say this previously, but before we give these Republicans too much credit, it was kind of an easy setup for them, I think. Because on the one hand, politically, you get to have it both ways, right? You get to say you're constitutionalists and you voted against the president, knowing he's going to veto it ultimately. There's not the votes to override the veto. So there's not really a consequence to having voted against the president other than being able to do your own home politics.
Simone, take a listen to Senator Mitt Romney from Utah. Both senators from Utah voted against the president on this. He voted against it as well.
For me, this is a constitutional question. It's a question about the balance of power that is core to our Constitution. This is not about the president or about border security. In fact, I support border security.
And he is a hardliner on border security. Sources telling CNN that in internal conversations, Trump actually characterized the votes as a loyalty pledge in a way.
And I'm not surprised to hear that. Look, I think there were a lot of senators today, some vulnerable Republican senators actually, that might have put themselves in a pickle when it comes to their 2020 reelection prospects. Look, a number of folks, the Arizona Republic was out with a headline right after the vote that said Martha McSally sided with Trump and against Arizonans. These things are coming home to roost, and so I think senators have to be careful in pledging their loyalty to the president when they're supposed to be representing the interests of their constituents. And I'd like to remind people, Donald Trump told us Mexico was going to pay for the wall.
That is true. He did say Mexico would pay for the wall. Mike, let me ask you about something that MK brought up a second ago, which is Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, the other senator from Utah, had a compromise that he offered, which is basically, we'll go along with you this time, but you have to bring in these emergency powers for the future. And Trump said, no, I'm not doing that. And then today he seemed to signal that he actually would be on board with that. He tweeted, if at a later date Congress wants to update the law, I will support those efforts. Do you think he missed an opportunity here to get all the Republicans on board?
I think that the president and the legislative branch fight all the time over a separation of powers. That is something that predates Trump. I know everything seems Trump. It's new. It's all him.
Well, this is the first time in such a big way that Republicans.
Well, we're making it a big way. I mean, there's been a fight between the legislative branch and the executive over and over on separation of powers. I think what he's looking at is, I didn't come here to live by the rules of the Senate. I didn't come here to live by the rules of Washington. I'm trying to build a border wall, and the more that it looks like a fight with Congress, which people don't like, great.
I'm trying to keep a political promise that actually is not true, because Mexico's not going to pay
Imagine someone getting
that's
elected and keeping their promises. That's actually going to be his campaign slogan. It's amazing, isn't it?
Only the core, it's only a small, when you said that across America, people support it. And as Simone pointed out, that's actually not true. It is a very small portion of the base that Trump continues to cater to heading into 2020.
Well, his voters. He's trying to be loyal to his voters.
There's a book that's called When Democracies Die, and democracies die when norms are eroded. And while, yes, Congress is always fighting with the president over separation of powers, but I think this is the first time, at least since I've been alive, and I turned 30 this year, Jake.
Happy birthday.
This is the first time since I've been alive that a sitting president has said, you're not going to fund this. I'm going to declare an emergency declaration and take money away from other places where the money has been appropriated by Congress, because that's how it goes, and fund other things.
Obama did something.
Except President Obama was just like, I can't do DACA, I can't do DACA, I can't do DACA. I'm going to do DACA. I'm not going to actually declare a national emergency, but I'm going to do DACA, and I dare you to tell me that 12 Democratic senators would have stood up and been like, no, you actually said you don't have the power to
Did
do
he
that.
take
It wouldn't
money
have
away?
happened.
Did President Obama?
You can
no, it's
parse
not the
all
same
you want
thing. I'm
because
not parsing.
it's an
What I'm
executive
saying
overreach.
Is, again, for the people at home, in my R. Kelly moment, where's the camera? For the people at home, Congress has the power to appropriate funds, okay? Congress has the power to appropriate funds. What Donald Trump is doing is overreaching, overstepping. He doesn't have
They're
this
both
power.
overreaches, and you are correct.
I want to show you guys one thing before we go to break. A Republican senator told CNN's Phil Mattingly, quote, "It's not like this signals some big break from the president going forward, but it is an example, one maybe we've avoided the last few years, that we can push back and send a message when we need to." I'd like to point out that Republican senator was anonymous. So that's how much that Republican senator is interested in pushing back.